for the masses.
Headline edition, July 8, 1947. The Army Air Forces has announced that a flying disc has been found and is now in the possession of the Army.
If the game is rigged, change the game. Game changer.
I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world.
This is Fade to Black with your host, Jimmy Church, on the Game Changer Radio Network.
All right, welcome, Fade to Black. How you doing? That's right. Today it is Tuesday, June 20th, 2023. Tonight it's Bigfoot all night long. We have Brett Eichenberger with us. He is the director and executive producer of the documentary A Flash of Beauty, Bigfoot Revealed. Tonight we're going to be discussing some of the interviews that he did for the movie and different researchers and eyewitnesses. And so we're going to do all of that and talk about Bigfoot in general tonight. I'm very excited about this show, and everybody here knows I love my big feet. That's right. So I would like to just get straight to it. All the links for Brett are below. We've got him on social media and over on the website. And I would like to welcome for the first time to Fade to Black, Brett Eichenberger. There he is. Brett, how you doing, man? Oh, hold on. Let me unmute you. Hey, Brett,
okay.
How you doing, man?
I was just moving my mouth. I wasn't really even saying anything. I'm doing fantastic. I'm doing great, Jimmy. Thanks for having me on your show.
Man, it's so great to have you here. Let's get the first-time guest disclaimer out of the way.
Okay.
Which is this. Brett, it's just you and I sitting on my couch having a conversation as friends. And where the conversation starts, it starts. Where it ends. But we're going to end as friends. There you go. All
Perfect.
right. Except click. You got to click. You got to click. There you go.
Oh, there we go.
Hey, can I start here? I'm just going to go there. How many?
Anywhere.
I feel like I'm interviewing Conan O'Brien.
You know, I have heard that going all the way back to high school. I'm not nearly as tall, and I don't nearly have as much. I don't have the Conan pompadour or whatever it is he has, which seems to get older or bigger and bigger as he
right.
ages.
So,
yeah.
I'm not planting a flag. I'm not discovering something right now. You've heard this before.
I've heard this before, but you know, my wife actually gets mistaken for Scarlett Johansson all the time. So,
oh, hey,
hey, you know what? I guess who got the better end of that deal?
Yeah, exactly. And
no offense to Conan, I love him. I think he's great. But
you know what? He probably would agree with us on that one. I kind of want to start here. I've talked about the movie on the show over the last few months. And it's great to actually have you here, to go in depth about it. But I have talked about it and talked about it.
Wow.
The universe has a strange way of connecting dots. You just put the vibe out there and then eventually stuff happens. And that's the way I run my life. But here's the thing. In the documentary, which is beautifully shot, and we'll talk about the overarching thing that you've got going on there, because it's different from other, not only Bigfoot documentaries, but documentaries in general. It's really well done. It's really well thought out. But is this, I do conspiracy fun stuff on this show, right? I do consciousness, I do science, I do physics, I do UFOs and ET, Bigfoot, right? Ghosts, life after death, time travel, right? All these things. And I love all of these subjects. But the UFO community is small compared to the Bigfoot community. Everybody in the country and in the Pacific Northwest has a Bigfoot story. Everybody's got a Bigfoot story. And you can, there's a moment in the film where What if he goes? So I just went in and sat down in this waiting room, 30 people, or was that there or something? I saw Bigfoot today, and he said, what he said, the 5 people had Bigfoot stories,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. In
And
the airport. That was Daryl in the airport.
yeah, I was in the airport, and that's really the way that it is. Bigfoot is a really, I'm going to say it, a big deal. And the Bigfoot community is strong, isn't it?
It's huge. It's huge. And just to kind of extrapolate on what you're talking about, Jimmy, there's a name for what you're describing. And Dr. Simeon Hine, who you haven't talked to, you've got to. He's amazing. He wrote a book called Dark Matter Monsters. But Dr. Simeon Hine is a sociologist, and he's extensively being interviewed in the sequel to A Flash of Beauty, Bigfoot Revealed, called A Flash of Beauty, Paranormal Bigfoot. We'll talk about that later. But Dr. Simeon Hine describes what you're describing as a hidden event. And it's something that sociologists know is occurring, but it's not really in the public. I mean, it's in pop culture maybe, but people are kind of still a little kind of freaked out to talk about their Bigfoot experiences. And when we first started doing this documentary, a lot of people kind of chuckled, because we come from a narrative filmmaking background. And so people thought, well, you really want to kind of torpedo your career by doing Bigfoot documentaries? That's kind of silly. I mean, this thing is kind of goofy, right? And I said, no, actually, there's a lot of substance to it. And I said this to a lot of people. My in-laws, for instance, were like, this is kind of embarrassing for us. And I said, Bob, it's only a matter of time before you meet somebody that's had an experience. And he kind of scoffed at that. And sure enough, there's a local judge that had a Bigfoot experience, somebody with credibility. But the point is that we've heard countless stories where people are like, my grandpa told me this story and he said to never ask about it again. He was the chief of police, or so-and-so saw this and they would never speak about it. Outdoorsmen are constantly, your hunters or whoever will see something and they won't tell their friends. A lot of these witnesses, there's a guy in our film, Mark Parker, he wouldn't even tell his wife, so it's because they're afraid of the ridicule. But the truth is that just like you said, everybody's got a Bigfoot story, and we're trying to get them to the point where it's like, okay, we got to start talking about this stuff right now. This is important.
All right. I'm uncomfortable saying this, but it's just a fact. I was a co-host of Coast to Coast AM for almost 7 years. Okay. I just left. And about 3 years ago or so, I'm hosting Coast. Life is Good, Fade to Black. I got my TV shows and things. And so I go to you, and I'm sure you've been there. But up in Northern California, between just south of the Oregon border, there's a Bigfoot gift shop, and it's giant. It's 1,000 wooden statues in the front parking lot. No exaggeration, right? It's just ginormous place. So I go, and I'm walking around, and I'm cocky, right? And I'm waiting to be recognized, let's do some selfies and that kind of stuff. And I asked for the manager of the store. And I wanted to tell the manager of the store, hey, man, it's me, Jimmy Church, Coast to Coast, Fade to Black. I'm here, And so the manager comes up. And I go, nice store. Yeah, thank you, man. How long you been here? 35 years. Really? You got a Bigfoot story? He goes, I do. Of course I do. Yeah. Okay. All right. I said, I'm Jimmy Church. He goes, okay. I'm Bob. I go, no reaction out of him. And I go, I host Coast to Coast AM. He goes, what's that?
Wow.
That's the Bigfoot community,
wow.
Right? Where, Coast to Coast, UFOs, life after death, consciousness, all of that stuff. That's not what the Bigfoot community is about. And that was my taste of it. I think that they're starting to mix a little bit, right?
Yes.
But
Yes.
but the Bigfoot community is okay just being left alone. They are doing their own thing, and I'm not far off, am I?
No, no, you're not. You're not. But what we have found through our research and just through the countless interviews that we've done, and a lot of interviews have happened outside of the documentary, because we'll do pre-interviews and whatnot. And sometimes we'll decide that somebody's not right for the film, or we'll hear from somebody after the film. And we're constantly getting stories. Every day we get a story from a fan or somebody that's seen the movie from across the world. Actually, I mean, we get stories from people everywhere. And the tide is kind of starting to change, and that's what our sequel is about the paranormal attributes that a lot of people are experiencing with Bigfoot. And we heard a lot of this from the initial interviews from a lot of the folks that are in the first film. And so we quickly realized that we were going to need to make a sequel that just tackled this whole paranormal idea. So what you're talking about, the UFOs, the consciousness, everything, quantum mechanics, the whole 9 yards, it all involves Bigfoot. And it's, our film isn't going to come out until October, but I can sit here and tell you right now that it's about to get really, really interesting. Really interesting.
There is okay, let's shift gears for a second before we really jump in to this film. I live in Hollywood, right? I'm in Palmdale, but I'm here in Los Angeles.
Sure.
I'm in the business. This is what I do: film, television, hosting, and all that stuff. And being in Hollywood, I appreciate the aesthetic. I appreciate the editing. I appreciate the framing. I appreciate the color, the colorist, the approach. I appreciate the lens selection. I appreciate a good screenplay and a good script and all of that. I'm not necessarily just looking at a movie for entertainment value, right?
Sure.
I get what you've done here. Is even the title of the film suggests what you're going to get here. This is a treatment of Bigfoot that hasn't been done before, both to the eyes, to the approach, and to the emotion. Everything. Why and how did you come up with that idea and that approach to filmmaking with such a delicate subject like this?
Well, it's kind of a long answer to a certain extent, but I'll keep it short. I mean, a lot of it starts off with my fascination with Steven Spielberg, and going back to being 5 years old and watching E.T. in the theater, and knowing then in the first grade that this is what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. Is I wanted to tell stories that were paranormal in nature and emotional in nature. And E.T. is the perfect example of that. And it wasn't shortly thereafter that I discovered Close Encounters of the Third Kind, which I believe is one of the most important movies ever made. And every disclosure moment that comes out, that movie gets more and more and more and more important. And so when, I've been fascinated with Bigfoot since I can remember. And the same goes with my wife, Jill Remensnyder, who was the co-producer on the project and a screenwriter. She also had a fascination with Bigfoot, but we have an emotional connection to Bigfoot. And we haven't seen, or we didn't see any documentaries out there that did have an emotional connection to Bigfoot, because the thing about it is Bigfoot has been sensationalized by these TV shows, these Expedition Bigfoot, Alaskan Killer Bigfoot, Finding Bigfoot. And I think there's a place for those shows, and I think those shows are great, and we watch those, but there's a lot more entertainment value in those shows. They package them in kind of like these horror films. And from the folks that we've been talking to going back to 2012, we were hearing people, hearing stories of people that were scared. Of course they were scared, but we weren't hearing about aggressive Bigfoot, tearing people apart. And, we weren't hearing stories about monsters. We were hearing stories about intelligent beings. And so when we decided to do A Flash of Beauty, I explicitly said, we need to get into the psychology of this, because some of the best proof of their existence is the trauma that is left afterwards in the wake of their existence. And we see this in the alien abductee community. I mean, these people are scarred, and medical science will show a scar on the brain under brain scans, under MRIs. You can actually see a scar from post-traumatic stress disorder. And what's so fascinating about Bigfoot and what Spielberg got right in Close Encounters of the Third Kind is that once these people have a sighting, whether it's 15 seconds or 15 minutes, they become obsessed with Bigfoot for the rest of their lives. They need to see it again. And so I became thoroughly fascinated by that. And that's why we interviewed, one of America's greatest psychologists, Dr. Michael Adams, a Yale graduate who didn't scoff at being in our film. You know what I mean? And why we interviewed a hypnotist, Doug Meacham. And so, I really wanted to get into that, and then we found Daryl Wilson in Vernal, Utah, who the guy he literally had weeks to live.
Yes.
And it saved his life. And I don't know that there was any sort of metaphysical healing that happened there, but it gave him a newfound purpose. And he's made friends all over the world through his encounter. So there's something that's very, very positive that's happening with these encounters. There are things that are very traumatic. There's things that are scary, but we have yet to interview anybody that's been physically harmed by one of these things.
There is a theme that is suggested, and it's really to do this in a documentary. It's a challenge because the documentary is going to edit itself eventually. Right?
Yeah.
Okay. This is more of a film. And so, and what the theme that is woven through is that we are dealing with hyper intelligent, extremely sentient beings here that think maybe better than us, right? They certainly seem to be outsmarting us.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. Yeah.
And you've this tapestry of this theme that is woven through, and hearing the emotional experiences from everybody, whether it's law enforcement or just somebody with a trail cam video, that is what's going on. That this is an extremely intelligent creature, right?
Absolutely, 100%. I mean, and we get into that even more so in the sequel. The intelligence of these beings is, I can say this pretty emphatically, actually, for lack of a better word. The intelligence of these beings is mind-blowing. And I personally believe through my experiences, and I know, the crew, the rest of us share these same sentiments, is that they have an intelligence that surpasses us as far as the knowledge of the universe, as far as what they're capable of, what their capabilities are, which is one of the reasons why, you can't find them. If we were dealing with a primate or some sort of an advanced gorilla, if you will, then we would be getting them on cameras all the time. But they're very well aware of what these things are and what they're capable of doing. And they know that a vocalization, which we're capturing all the time, people are constantly hearing them. They know a vocalization only goes so far. But a visual is something that's entirely different. And we've seen that from the Patterson-Gimlin film. So, yeah, I mean, and the other part about their intelligence and another sign of great intelligence is that they have a sense of humor. And these stories of them, kind of clowning around go all the way back hundreds of years with native tribes. But we've got witnesses that talk about the funny things they do. In the sequel, we talk about the gifting and how personal the gifting is and how catered it is to the individual that's having those interactions. So it's really kind of something special to be discovering this being that's literally living right under our nose.
How difficult was it to do a documentary that, all the other Bigfoot documentary, UFO documentaries, whatever, right? The big cases, the normal things, it's so repetitive. It's wash, rinse, repeat, right?
Yeah.
And you put this together. You also were the editor on this film.
Mm-hmm.
And so the sensational, jump shots, right, are not what. Actually, there's two moments in the film where I went, "What?" So we'll get back to that. But that's how difficult is it to edit it with that process of dealing with presenting knowledge to the audience instead of bubblegum drive-in theater shock stuff?
For this particular project, it wasn't too difficult. I mean, at the end of the day, we need to be able to entertain. We need to be entertainers to a certain extent. So there has to be this mixture that's woven in. I mean, first and foremost, I don't want anybody to question any of the people that were brave enough to bare their souls on camera. That's what's most important to me. And that's why we chose to have them look directly into the camera, because we wanted it to feel like it was a one-on-one conversation. But, I mean, Larry Turner, who you might have been talking about, he has a hand come up through the tent and it cradles his head and the thumb comes underneath his chin. Larry lives 4 or 5 miles away from me. I mean, that guy is as honest and as genuine as you will ever meet. But that's frightening. I mean, I can't imagine, this was his 5th or 6th time being around them, but I can't imagine being in Larry's position. And so that's a moment you have to make scary, because it's nothing, there's no other way to describe it.
Right.
So, we've got to have those moments. I want people to be enthralled by it. I don't want it to be a slow moving. Sometimes documentaries can be very slow and boring, and other times they can just have a jump just to have a jump, and if it doesn't serve any purpose as far as moving the story forward, then what's it doing in the film?
Now let's talk about Ron Moorhead for a second.
Mm-hmm.
Fascinating. I mean, just his background and his story. He's just a fascinating person in general. But
yes.
I think that you've sat down with him. I haven't yet. I've wanted him on the show. I've just never reached out. But here's the deal. Ron, his evidence goes back to the early 1970s, 71, 72.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he was on the skeptic side of the fence. I just didn't, and I think everything caught him by surprise.
Yeah.
What he ended up doing, a lot like the Patterson-Gimlin film, is he captured something remarkable. And it's those recordings. And
Yep.
I used to go and listen to those recordings over and over again. I'll never forget the first time that I heard them. When you first heard Ron Moorhead's recordings of, let's just call it conversation. It could be fighting. It could be telling jokes. I have no idea.
Yeah, right.
And I'm not making light of it because it's very serious stuff. But what did you make of it when you first heard the Bigfoot conversations?
That's an interesting question, Jimmy. I first heard Ron Moorhead on Coast to Coast AM with Art Bell back in the 90s. And
So
I mean,
did I.
like I said, I mean, I've been a huge fan of this stuff since I was a little kid. And when I was in college, I delivered newspapers. So in the middle of the night, every night, I was listening to Coast 4 or 5 hours as I tossed newspapers out the window and sped through people's neighborhoods. And I will never forget listening to Ron Moorhead on Coast to Coast AM. And never forget, it's like it was yesterday, even though it was almost 30 years ago. And I remember thinking to myself, hearing those recordings, thinking, this is just crazy. Like, this is like, who is this guy? Like, it just sounded so out of left field when I first heard them. I'll never forget that feeling. And now I have since heard those voices for real in the wild. I've heard that samurai chatter. And man, if you ever needed something to stand your hair up on the back of your neck, it is a weird sound.
You almost can understand it. It's like a weird.
Yes.
Right. I mean, you listen to it more and it almost Moorhead. You listen to Moorhead more. and And you can hear the inflections and the conversation and the intention, and you almost know what they're talking about. It is a language.
Yeah, it's definitely language. It's kind of like for anybody that's lived in an apartment with thin walls, and they hear if the neighbors are fighting or something like that, and you just hear like the the bass or it's that muted kind of like it's like the Snoopy teacher, that wah wah wah, almost. But you can tell that there's emotion in their voices for sure. And they're really incredible.
Now, Scott Nelson,
Hmm.
who is a linguist, right?
Yeah,
Voice expert.
naval linguist, yeah, crypto
Yeah.
linguist.
Wow. And tell us, how did you find Scott? And if you could give us some insight on his opinions of the language.
So okay, so Scott, we got in touch with Scott through Ron, and Scott. This was when did we interview? We interviewed Scott in 2021. So this was kind of still in the pandemic to a certain extent, and Scott had been teaching at a school, like a military prep school, and he was teaching. I don't remember exactly what he was teaching, but he was teaching, boys in a military prep school just outside of Kansas City. And so we went to Kansas City, and he's living on a house. He's living on a sailboat in this lake in Kansas City, and so we go out and we'd see him, and we had a great time. And that's you see him in the film, and he's like during the pandemic, he like grew out his hair and he grew out a beard, and if you Google old pictures of Scott Nelson, he looked totally different. And so when we arrived, to his place, it was just Jill and I, and it was like, are you Scott? You're not the guy I saw on the internet. But it was cool. We had a great night that night. But man, is that guy smart? He's brilliant. I don't know how many languages he knows. I think it's 9. And in very, very complex languages like Farsi. And I know from past experience, I did a little bit of work as a defense contractor at the military. I know what it takes to be somebody in his position, to be a naval crypto linguist. The military has no need for guys that aren't pros, that aren't good, that aren't smart, that aren't intelligent. When you're talking about military stuff, warfare, that kind of stuff, they need guys that are on point. And Scott is that guy. And he knows exactly what he's listening to. He knows exactly what it takes to vocalize something like that. He knows exactly what the human vocal range is capable of. He knows all of that stuff. And when he first heard those sounds, I mean, he literally dropped everything to find out exactly what it was, how it was being made. And he's since been, he and Ron have since been up to Sierra Camp a few times. He told us some crazy stories about his trips up there. So, I mean, I don't doubt their authenticity one bit.
The in the beginning of the film, Mount Adams is brought up, and I've been there many times, and I have had I've never seen Bigfoot. I've seen footprints.
Yeah.
Okay, and maybe after the break, I'll pull up to the audience is going to go, man, if we have to see these one more time. but I was kind of on the fence before that. I've had Jeffrey Meldrum on the show and many Bigfoot people on the show, but when you see, and that was at Mount Adams, right? And these giant, deep footprints in this field. It was crazy. It was nuts. And that caught my attention. Why do you think the Pacific Northwest, obviously it's trees and it's mountains and there's less population, but that's where most of the sightings are and a lot of the history is established. Have you had your own experience, and why do you think that is the area, on this planet? They're everywhere, but it's the Pacific Northwest.
I haven't had a sighting myself, but we have had experiences. We've heard sounds. The samurai chatter I heard was actually in the Midwest. But we've heard tree knocking, you name it. We found prints ourselves. It's hard before starting this documentary, I thought the Pacific Northwest was the only place that Bigfoot maybe the Pacific West Coast all the way up to Alaska and California, Northern California. But now I'm convinced there are populations that are really strong everywhere across the country. We get stories from Texas, from New England, from Ohio is like 6th or 7th in the nation in sightings, which blows my mind. But you're right. I mean, Oregon, Washington are consistently in the top 5 states in the union. As to why there's so many things here, I've got a lot of different theories. There's some really, really interesting stuff happening right now in Oregon. I mean, like bizarre stuff happening down in Southern Oregon. And I think it really has to do, and people will say, like, I think the more science-based folks, and I'm not saying I'm not science-based, but people will say, well, they've got to eat, they've got to row, they've got to have a source of water. And all of that is true. But I personally think that it might also have something to do with, mineral contents. There's this idea that you'll find them more around like lakes and areas with granite and whatnot. So, I think that might have something to do with it. There's always been these, I shouldn't say always, but there's been these theories that UFOs, Mount Adams is a great example, that UFOs are attracted to volcanoes. And of course, the Cascade Range is one volcano after another. Mm-hmm. And these aren't dormant volcanoes. These are active volcanoes. Mount Hood is active. Rainier is active. St. Helens is the famous one. Adams is active. These are volcanoes that could blow any given moment, really. And so that could be part of it. I'm not quite sure, but the one thing that I can tell you, the one thing that I have heard, which is a little off topic, is that I've heard about the different clans or the different tribes will mm-hmm. take on different personalities around different mountains. So I've heard that the ones by Mount St. Helens are pretty grumpy and pretty aggressive, whereas the ones near Mount Hood are kind of more docile, so on and so forth. But yeah, I mean, that's a great question, but I think they're everywhere. I mean, they're in the Oregon Coast Range, which is not volcanic.
Now, okay. So much to discuss tonight, but this is where I'm going to go for now.
Yeah. Yeah.
When we talk about, and I'm a grown man and I'm about to say what I'm about to say with a straight face. All the discussion about, where bodies, bones, DNA, where's the evidence, and then we have the Patterson-Gimlin film, right? And you can't have one, and stay in that direction, because that eliminates the woo-woo or the supernatural aspect to this. Mm-hmm. But the more that I look at this, what pushes me out of my sensible zone, right? It's just a species that's avoiding humans. That's all it is. To something more otherworldly, interdimensional, coming and going as they please. While they are here, they leave footprints, but they have the ability of appearing and disappearing very quickly. And the lack of evidence being left behind may be because it's something more supernatural. Now, am I talking crazy? But that makes more sense to me now than it's just a species avoiding humans.
That you're exactly right, Jimmy. And this is the conclusion that we've come to through our process. And when I first heard about the woo side of things, it was from Ron Moorhead himself. I was sitting across from him at a picnic table at a function called Beachfoot. And he's like, well, we tracked footprints in the snow and they just stopped and they didn't turn around.
Right.
And you know how many times I've heard that from people now? And how many times I've heard people talk about them cloaking? We have a whole segment in the sequel with, in fact, I showed some footage to Eric Bard from Skinwalker Ranch and had him look at it to get his assessment. And his theory is incredible. Wait till you hear his theory. I'm going to keep it secret. But there is a component there that's undeniable. And the most important thing is you can't just throw out the data because it doesn't fit your paradigm. You can't
Right.
just toss it out, and I think there's a lot of people that are afraid of the fact that they might be paranormal or woo or whatever. But what we want to do is we want to try and develop science around that, because there is a science to it. And what we're finding out, and again, I highly suggest folks go and read Dark Matter Monsters by Dr. Simeon Hine, who's somebody you really need to have on the show. He's a fascinating guy. And Simeon Hine breaks it down as to how they could be quote unquote paranormal. And it comes down to quantum mechanics. It comes down to relic neutrinos and cold fusion and all kinds of really, really strange science that we're only beginning to understand. But what's really fascinating to us is that these are the same types of things we're hearing with UFOs, with close encounters, with some of the things that the UFOs are doing. These are technologies that are bending and warping space-time. And some of these situations where a Bigfoot will just disappear or it'll just cloak are very similar. A great case in point, Jimmy, is this Las Vegas alien thing that everybody's talking about. And which for the record, I think is 100% authentic. And one of the things that really kind of set me on fire was hearing this young man, Angel, talk about how he looked at them and they were blurry. And I'm like, whoa. I mean, I literally got the chills when he said that. I was like, this happened. That's all I needed to know. And the reason why is because it's exactly what people describe when they see a Bigfoot cloak. It's blurry. It's there, but they're somehow changing their wavelength, their vibrations. I don't know. I'm nowhere near a physicist or scientist. I'm a filmmaker. But Bigfoot is doing the same exact thing. They're going blurry. We have footage of it in the sequel. Very, very good footage. So it's there. It's real. I mean, I think it's really happening.
For me, when I looked at these prints, I'm not going to get into the story. I'm just not going to do that. But there were 4 prints in this field at Mount Adams, right? Mm-hmm. Big field, just big grass field, right? And these 4 footprints, and they were left, right. They were like 6 feet apart, and they were in an arc, right? Like turning to the right. Standing there, I've got a documentary film crew with me, shooting something else. This was an accident.
Wow.
And so anyway, I went, well, wait a minute, man. Let's clear this out. There's got to be more prints. And there weren't. Mm-hmm. And these were deep.
Yeah.
Right? These were deep in the hard packed dirt, like 1.5 2 inches deep. And I'm like, huh. They start and they stop. Where'd he go? Or she, right? Mm-hmm. Where'd he come from? Right? There's nothing marching in. There's just these 4, like, came in, dropped in, ran, right? Took 4 steps and then poof.
Yeah.
And you just got to scratch your head and wonder what's really going on here. That you're looking at it, but it doesn't make any sense.
It doesn't make any sense. The best illustration that I've ever seen of this, to be honest with you, Jimmy, was in the new movie, The Flash. And there's scenes where the Flash, he walks through solid matter. And what he does is he changes his vibration and he starts wiggling really fast. And they do this really cool CGI effect where you see the molecules intersecting and passing through. And he'll end up walking through a wall or walking through a door. And I think that they're doing something similar to that. They're somehow, I don't know if they're vibrating at a higher frequency. I don't know what they're doing in order to not leave footprints, in order to not have that mask.
Are your in-laws okay with you talking like this?
My father-in-law is a veterinarian, so he's all in right now on Bigfoot now. I mean, I think he's convinced. Right. And what's funny is that Jill's mom, my mother-in-law, she's like sending us like Bigfoot reports and stuff like that. And it's cool. It's super cool, man.
Yeah, right on. Well, now here, and for me to be on the skeptical side of Bigfoot for so many years
Hmm.
is a strange thing, because if the UFO community had the Patterson-Gimlin film, it would be case closed.
Yeah.
There wouldn't be any conversation about this at all.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the Patterson-Gimlin film, every time I watch it, that's real.
That's real.
That's real. But yet I'm skeptical. See, it doesn't make any sense. It's like, what? I can't be this walking paradox.
Yeah.
This hypocritical mindset. But that's where we are.
That's where we are. And I completely understand, because it conflicts with our own reality so drastically that it's just hard for us to wrap our heads around it. And there's a lot of us out there that fear the unknown, that, things that we're not comfortable, aliens and Bigfoot, and, but at the same time, we're in church on Sunday or the synagogues or whatever. And there we are worshiping supernatural entities, Jesus Christ. Ron Moorhead talks about this in his book, The Quantum Bigfoot. Jesus Christ does a lot of the same things that people are reporting seeing Bigfoot do. Walking on water, levitating, these types of different things. And so this is where we're coming back and saying, wait a minute, hold on a second. They're all utilizing the same science. They're all doing the same kind of thing. And don't get me wrong. I want to stress that I believe that Bigfoot is a biological entity. It's a biological entity that is evolved to a point to figure out how to, do this stuff, just like aliens. Aliens are just far more advanced than we are. And, they have capabilities. We have skills we have yet to learn. I totally lost track of your question.
No, that was a great answer, though. You had no, but see, here's the thing, though, and I'm going to say here's the thing so many times tonight. You're a filmmaker,
yeah,
and you turn around and you look at, and I know that you've had every single frame of Patterson-Gimlin. And you're looking to see, I'm assuming, how this could be faked, right? That's it. This cannot be real. So that's what you do. You study this film. How many times have you watched it? And after each one, is your belief system more cemented?
I love this subject. I love the Patterson-Gimlin subject so much, because I would bet my life that movie is real. And here's the thing that nobody's talking about with Patterson-Gimlin, and something that I know you will appreciate, Jimmy. And Dr. Meldrum's touched on it a little bit as far as the costume is concerned. Okay. So in the 1960s, the Planet of the Apes, or the late 1960s, early 70s, Planet of the Apes won an honorary Oscar for costumes. Okay. So go back and watch Planet of the Apes and look at those costumes. All right. They were fine. They were great for that time period. But they didn't have CGI back then, and they are nowhere near the quality of costume that the Patterson-Gimlin footage shows that Patty is wearing, if you will. That's it's form fitting. If it is a costume, it would be form fitting. It would be to exact specs. It would be movable. So here's the reason why I think this is 100% authentic. Logistics. Okay. When you're a filmmaker and you go out and your goal is to make a convincing film, there's a lot of things that you have got to do in order to get that film right. You got to cast your actor. You got to find a location. You've got to put together your production designer, your costumes. You've got to rehearse your performance. Okay. So, and then you enter Bob Gimlin and Roger Patterson, a couple of cowboys looking to make a quick buck driving cattle through. Really, I don't know if anybody's been down to the Bluff Creek area. Jill and I were there about a year ago to the day, actually, looking at the original site. It is rugged as all get out. It's extremely difficult to get to. Okay. So you take all of and here's two guys that live in Yakima, Washington. They could have gone over to Mount Adams. They could have gone 20 minutes away and just gotten this over with to fake it. Okay.
They could have stayed in Yakima.
Yeah. They could have stayed in Yakima. I mean, seriously, they could have done this in the afternoon. They could have been home for a whiskey.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
But no, it's all taking place down here in this area. And when you go frame by frame, and you look at that walk, I'm thinking to myself, who's that actor? Because he should be given an Oscar because of the way that it walks, the way that it moves, the fact that the costume had breasts. You think a couple of cowboys would?
That's the game changer for me.
The game changer.
Yeah, and now you bring up Planet of the Apes, and which is easy enough to do because Planet of the Apes, they've got the best makeup and costume and prosthetics people in Hollywood, the highest paid, put the team together, and they struggled to get that movie made. And as fake as it looks, it's one of my favorite movies, but it is what it is. But let's talk about Stanley Kubrick.
Yeah.
Stanley Kubrick, who is was one of my favorite directors, if not my favorite director, was a perfectionist. If you had a 2-word line, 2 words, yes, sir, he did 100 takes.
Mm-hmm.
100 takes. And are you saying that Patterson and Gimlin, one take Jake, one take, you know, and Kubrick, as great as 2001 is, it's fake.
Yeah.
He struggled to make sure that he had the best actors, the best things. Those guys practiced and studied at the zoo and gorillas and mimicking and everything else. And it was still dudes in gorilla suits. Right? And then you turn around and you look at Patterson-Gimlin, and that's not the vibe you get there. That's not
at all.
That's not a costume.
Not at all. It's not a costume. I mean, people have got to remember that 2001 was the Marvel movie event of the time that it came out. You know, you're exactly right. The best technicians, the best anybody and everybody worked on that movie to make that movie look perfect. And as a great example, there's a scene, the opening scene of that film are apes. They're guys in monkey costumes, and they toss the bone up, and you got that famous match cut to the spaceship. Go back and look at those apes. You know, they look okay. They're not terrible, but this is no Patty. This is no Patty.
It was the best that Stanley Kubrick could do.
Yeah. And it still stands up. I mean, it's great, but it's no Star Wars. You know,
it's telling the story. Oh, be careful! Sorry. You're right. though. That cut scene between the bone and the spaceship.
Yeah,
cinematic genius.
It's amazing, and the monolith and the on the moon.
Yeah,
I meant Star Wars as far as visual effects go. I mean, 2001 is a classic. Don't get me wrong.
If you want to go down the Star Wars 2001 comparison show and change right now off of Bigfoot, game on.
I'll pass.
You're not going to win that one.
I'll pass.
But back to Patterson-Gimlin, the suggestions of a horsehide, costume, and it's like, have you watched the film?
Yeah.
When you're making these claims, you're looking at muscles flex. Those boobs are in the breeze.
Yep.
Right. And that's an impossibility to do. It's, today's CGI, but it's the muscles under the skin and the flexing, the walk and meldrum and the gait and all. Yes, that's because it's real. But it's the other stuff. Why would somebody try to convince others that that's a costume when you can look at it and see the muscles?
Yeah. Yeah, it's almost like a knee-jerk reaction. It's almost like people are afraid for it to be real. The other thing about this too, Jimmy, is that people that are involved in Hollywood and making movies, if somebody were to design that costume, there's egos in this business.
Oh, yes.
There's egos. And the other thing about that too is that eventually the guilt weighs down. If this is a hoax or if this is a lie, somebody confesses to it, whether it was the guy that made the costume or it was Patterson or it's Gimlin. I've met Gimlin in person. The guy is like a sweetheart of a man. You know what I mean? And he maintains to this day at 92, 93 years old, he maintains the authenticity of that film. You know what I'm saying? And it's like, it's in a lot of ways, it's that, 15 seconds or whatever it is of film has kind of controlled his entire life. It's his identity anywhere and everywhere he goes. So wouldn't it just be easier for him to just say, all right, Roger and I, we made it up. It was cool while it lasted. I thought we did a pretty good job, and so made the costume, but nobody said anything because nobody has anything to say other than it's real.
No, you're right about the ego part. If they would have said that, they would have the careers that could have been built
Yes.
off of that. I mean, like serious business, and no, that it's not the case. The other part about the Patterson-Gimlin film is that once it's stabilized, it's convincing's not the right word, but it's not showing fakeness. It's improving on the reality of it. And I think that the debunkers out there, right, and the skeptics of the world were hoping that stabilizing that would reveal the flaws. Instead, it shows the perfection of nature.
It does. It shows the perfection of nature. And I've been saying this for a while now, that as technology gets better and better and better, that film becomes better and better and better. In that, a lot of people forget that because you see scratches and hairs and dirt and dust in film, they think that film is far inferior to digital video, and that's entirely untrue. Film is, and although they don't have the original negative that was shot on yet, they have prints of it, and even those prints, you're talking about like HD to ultra HD quality, and if you scan it correctly, which they've done now, you get that kind of detail, and Henry Franzoni, who was given $500,000 to disprove it in the late 90s, couldn't do it. They couldn't do it. They literally went to New York City and they used this machine called a telecine machine to transfer it to digital to just pick it apart. And the more they tried to pick it apart, the more they proved it was real.
The original print, the story behind that and how it was stored and just disappeared.
Mm-hmm.
That's a caper, isn't it?
I don't know a lot about it. I just know that it was there one day and gone the next.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, they know who was coming and going, right?
Mm-hmm.
At the film, it's a vault, a film vault.
Yeah.
And it's, you know what I mean? But that the original print it's just disappeared.
And what's interesting is a lot of Ron Moorhead's original audio recordings burnt up in a house fire. So the two very important pieces of history that we're missing the originals of. But luckily, copies are out there, and those copies are pretty dang good.
Now, before we head to the break, do you feel, and we'll continue this after the break, Bigfoot, male or female, it's kind of weird. It's got a male slant to it.
Yeah.
But anyway, is only seen if they want to be seen, right? Is that the way that you feel?
That's the way I feel. And it's what's really interesting is we were talking to a psychic that we've been working with down in near Eugene, Oregon, and she has an open line of communication. I don't want to get too much into this because it's in our sequel, but I asked her point blank. I said, if you're talking to the Bigfoot people and ask them why Patty allowed herself to be filmed, why didn't she run away or hide in the trees? And her response, her name is Tara, the psychic, her response was she didn't care. She said almost all of them don't want to be seen or photographed, but this particular one at this particular time didn't care. For what that's worth, I don't know. But yes, you're right. I think that, anybody and everybody that we've talked to, virtually everybody that we've talked to that has had a sighting has another one, or they have something else strange happen to them. So it does feel very, Chad and Austin in our film swore that it showed themselves to him.
Can we let's talk about those two for a second?
Okay.
How did you find them, or did they find you?
Man, this whole process for both films has been organic, and it just, these people just come into our lives and we find them and stuff. Chad and Austin I found on Facebook, and Chad made this post in like one of the Bigfoot forums. He's like, I don't know what's going on. We had this sighting, we were freaked out. Who do we talk to? So on and so forth. I mean, psychologically, those guys were really messed up for months.
And they're both very cinematic.
Yeah, totally.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. They're both very cinematic, man. They really capture the moment and are not afraid of the camera.
No.
Very natural, very just those two and their story, and their encounter. Well, if you're the guest, what happened? They went to go camping, right?
So yeah, it's another one of those kind of hard to believe stories. So basically, Chad and Austin, they met at car shows and stuff like that. Good buddies. They decided they wanted to do YouTube videos and surviving in the wilderness. And both those guys, Austin was in the military. I think he served a couple of duties, tours of duty in Iraq and Afghanistan. Chad's just been out in the woods his entire life. And so they were like, let's do YouTube videos and surviving. Let's go out to this lake down to the California-Oregon border, and we'll rough it. And he's like Chad's like, I'm going to have my wife drop us off, and she won't come get us unless she absolutely needs to. And they could never imagine a scenario where that would take place, right? It's like early October. The weather's perfect. They go out there, they're fishing, they're filming these videos, they're, doing whatever it is they do. And they had a camp that there's a slope. That lake is it's almost like it's in a crater, and you can kind of see it from the aerial shots, but you can't really tell that the angles of slope are pretty steep. So they'd built a camp up from the lake, and they'd left their tent and their cameras and all their stuff up top. And it's like 5:30, 6 o'clock in the evening, and they go down to the lake to fish to catch their dinner for that night. Cause hey, they didn't bring in any food or anything else.
No, Chad goes, went down the lake to drop in some lines.
Yeah. So they're going to fish, and they're all alone up there. I mean, this is another one of those places that when we decided to go out and film there, we're like, okay, we had to drive through a river to get there. I mean, it was nuts. It was totally nuts. It's not a place that you find your casual weekend warriors at. And so they're up there, and they're down at the lake, and they're fishing, and they look across the lake. And this lake is about the length of a football field. I measured it with my drone. I flew from where they were standing to the other end of the lake. It's about 100 yards. And they see this kind of red cinnamon color thing standing there. And they're just like, bear, sow, like, and then they see the juvenile, and the creature takes the juvenile, puts the head like a dad or a mom would do if they didn't want the child to see something traumatic or something. And it moved it behind it to protect it. And then they took off lightning fast. And the whole sighting lasted for like 90 seconds to 2 minutes.
Now let's examine what you just said, because I think it's very important. And I've heard a lot of that. I've never heard this side of things, where it's a parent, right? Don't know if it's male or female, but it's a parent.
Yeah.
Got the kid with them, right? And the parent does what every good parent does with their child at a moment like that. You scoot your child behind you to protect them.
Yep.
And that's what these two saw. And I think that emotionally, that's what they remember about Bigfoot, was this parenting aspect.
And Chad's a parent, I think he's got 2 or 3 kids. And so that really had an effect on him to see this parent sheltering their child. As a father, that really had a profound effect on him. Austin, on the other hand, works in a center for kids that are dealing with some challenges, whether it's developmental disabilities or what have you. And, he's got that same kind of emotional IQ, if you will. So what they were observing really resonated with them on an emotional level. It wasn't just like, wow, look at that hairy guy. You know what I mean? It was very, very deep. And, this is the thing that I love doing when I'm a filmmaker. I love to talk about, the behind the scenes stuff. And some of the stuff that they're saying, I recorded when they didn't know I was recording them. I was just rolling audio the entire time. And they're standing there going, and Austin's like, I can't believe we're standing here. My life has never been the same again. And these guys are having bro moments, right? They're having these come to Jesus bro moments about what they experienced.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm listening to this on my headphones and I'm like 200-300 feet away. They're ahead of me. And I'm just like, whoa, like I never questioned their validity ever. These guys are the most earnest guys ever. But just hearing that, instead of them putting on a quote unquote performance for the camera or being prepped for the camera, it was real. It was real.
And what an interaction where they were definitive about the color.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. No, it wasn't brown. Wasn't dark brown. Wasn't black. No. Cinnamon.
Yeah.
Very Chewbacca-ish.
Yes. Yep. We hear the cinnamon color a lot, actually. It's very common. It's like jet black or cinnamon.
Chad goes, so I'm looking across, I'm like, what? And he's got both of them, but he's got this very honest demeanor about him. Mm-hmm. And he just wants to tell the story, his experience as it happened. And that's it. He's just got this very, very honest. What's the word? Trustworthy? Is that the right?
Yeah, no, trustworthy, earnest. I mean, authentic.
Yes.
And he's like that in person. I mean, that's who that man is. He's a wonderful guy, man. He's great. I mean, they drove all the way up to Southern Oregon for their first interview, and then we drove up from Southern Oregon to Portland, which is about 4.5 hours. They drove up by themselves, and we did their first interview. And then we subsequently went down to the lake about 3 months later after the snow had melted. But they're just as authentic on camera as they are in real life. Really great guys to work with.
Let's take our break right here. It is break time. Our guest tonight, Brett Eichenberger. We're talking about A Flash of Beauty, Bigfoot Revealed. The film was released about a year ago. I saw it for the first time about 3 months ago when I started talking about it here on Fade to Black. It's on all the streaming platforms. The links for it are below. We've got it over on the website. And so I'm sure everybody's going to go and watch the film if you haven't already after the show. We'll be right back after this short break. Stay with us. This is Jimmy Church of Fade to Black. Please visit all of our sponsors. We're taking a quick break here. All of the links are below. We'll be right back. Join us November 10th, 11th, and 12th, 2023 as Disclosure Fest Foundation and Fade to Black Radio presents Stairway to the Stars, a Human Origins Science and Technology Expo, live at the Luxor Hotel and Casino on the Las Vegas Strip. With live talks, lectures, and workshops by world-acclaimed researchers and authors. This is Jimmy Church, by the way, and I'll be your host all weekend long. Featuring topics like human origins, ancient technologies, indigenous teachings, workshops, a mass meditation, yoga and sound healing, music, and so much more. Don't miss our intimate sky watch and meteor shower over the infamous Area 51 airspace in Rachel, Nevada, with special surprise celebrity hosts guiding us through the night. Also introducing our Disclosure Fest VR Starship area with dozens of rides. You've got to check it out. This event will sell out. For more information and tickets, please visit disclosurefest.org. The secret is out. LifeWave's X39 is the reason why I have got my vision back. This is Jimmy Church of Fade to Black, and you need to go straight to healingworksnow.com. That's healingworksnow.com. Works with an X. All of the information that you need is on that portal. Find out why I look great. I feel great. I'm thinking clearly. I sleep. I dream. Life is good. all of it. You've got to check out LifeWave's X39 and all of their other products. It's all simple to do. Go to healingworksnow.com. That's healingworksnow.com. Works with an X.
Hey everybody, it's Billy Carson, also known as Forbidden Knowledge. I want to talk to you about a very special event coming up July 30th, 2023, the Forbidden Conscious Awards. We're going to honor people who have been contributing to the conscious community for decades. People that you know and love that have helped you get to higher levels of thought and consciousness and awareness. It's going to be a live in-person event, but seats are going to sell out very fast. You want to make sure you're there in person, and guess what? You can help vote for the winners. Voting is available on forbiddenknowledge.com, and the categories are going to be social media influencer, podcast/radio host, TV host, actor, director, producer, entrepreneurs, health and wellness, philanthropists, authors, field researchers, archaeologists, space anomaly hunters, and of course, a Lifetime Achievement Award. I'll be your keynote speaker that night at the Forbidden Conscious Awards. We have celebrity guests performing. We'll have a halftime show where we're actually going to perform music for you. And don't forget about the pre-event mixer, where if you buy a box seat, you'll be in the VIP section, and you also have private access to a VIP mixer with celebrity guests, shake hands, break bread, network, and then walk the red carpet with us and take amazing photos. It's going to be a night to remember. You don't want to forget this. Make sure you hurry up and get your tickets because they're selling out very fast. I want to see you there. Forbidden Conscious Awards 2023.
River Moon Coffee, makers of the Fade to Black blend. Truly the best coffee on planet Earth. Just visit rivermoonwellness.com or their Amazon store. It's all simple to do. You can check out the Fade to Black blend, the Game Changer blend, or any of their Black Moon wellness products. It's the only coffee I drink. It is the best, and it's Doc. Again, rivermoonwellness.com. All right. Welcome back. Fade to Black. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Tonight, we are talking to director Brett Eichenberger about his documentary about Bigfoot. It is called A Flash of Beauty, Bigfoot Revealed. And it is just, documentary is not the right word, but I don't, it's not fair. I think that people expect something else from a documentary. Documentaries are called documentaries because of documents, right?
Yeah.
That's not what's going on here. But I want to ask you this. Should some things just not be discovered? Should some things just be left alone? We're just not meant, at least right now, to find out things.
I don't know. That's a great question, Jimmy. Nobody's ever really asked me that, and that's a pretty loaded question. I don't know where I stand on that. The question is are we mature enough to handle it? Are we smart enough to handle it? And not to be, pessimistic or anything, but you look around the world and you see where we're at as a civilization, and there's some tough things going on. The war in Ukraine, Russia comes to mind. Some of the things that we're doing as a species and as a civilization are pretty archaic. And so, should we be allowed to know some of these things? I mean, some of the technology that Dr. Stephen Greer talks about could revolutionize our world. With this alien technology, it's possible we could live hundreds of years. But have we earned that right? Do we, it's like the stories you hear of them going and putting a stop to nuclear weapons, the aliens, the UFOs, the accounts of the military, watching them shut these nuclear weapons off. Were we ever mature enough to even have that knowledge of nuclear technology, and have aliens prevented nuclear war? You know what I mean? These are the things that I kind of think about. So I don't know. I think some things, yes. I think there's some technology and there's some discoveries out there that people know about that could stop global warming climate change in its tracks. And we know that's happening right now.
Let's go into a hypothetical scenario.
Mm-hmm.
right? We find a Bigfoot body. It's on display, right? It's been analyzed. Sasquatch is real, right? They're not everybody, but you are going to have some yahoos, right?
Oh yeah.
Let's go Bigfoot hunting, right? And
We show them in the movie. Yeah, exactly.
it's like the inevitable thing, right? And I say yahoos not as a term of endearment, by the way,
Yes.
right? So you got your 4-wheel drive Chevy pickup truck, with 6 dudes in the back and 3 dudes in the front, and they're going to go squatch hunting.
Yeah.
And that's the part that it's a reality. That's what we would unleash. So should we have legislation ready to go? It should killing a Bigfoot be equal to killing a human?
100%. Absolutely. And there's laws on the books that state that already in certain places. Skamania County comes to mind. Skamania County, Washington has a law. I called Art Bell. I called Coast to Coast as a kid, and it was like, "Hey, Art, did you know there's a Bigfoot law if you kill it?" Oh, yes, I know. That was the only time I ever called Coast to Coast. But it's true. We do need to be ready. And all of this sounds absurd. It sounds crazy. But the reality is there's something out there, and we need to be ready. And I'm hoping that government agencies or somebody in power, and I think they are. Jimmy, I honestly think that there's a plan out there. I think some of the states, maybe Oregon, Washington, Alaska, what have you, somebody knows something. There's a book in a closet. Like, what do we do if we discover Bigfoot? How do we, what do we close roads? Do we create sanctuaries? What do we do? There's got to be.
Yeah, the rangers, that's a federal situation. And I don't want to get too sideways off into this, but the rangers know what's up.
Yep.
100, absolutely 100%. This is a subject that they are trained on.
Yep.
I believe that. I'm stating that as fact.
Yep.
And then when we have things like forest fires or we have natural disasters, and these crazy situations that happen, there isn't evidence that is left behind, and it seems like there would be cleanup teams, right, in place. Have you heard anything about this?
Here you go. Here we go. Okay, so Pacific Northwest, Mount St. Helens, 1980.
Right.
Yes, there have been numerous reports. I read another one from a guy today, a volcanologist, that's all I'll say, who has knowledge of many Bigfoot bodies being discovered after the explosion of Mount St. Helens. And the Army and whoever else was there on the ground in those hours after the eruption, they were out there cleaning those bodies up. There were eyewitnesses to this. And I'm desperately looking to speak to these people, because being that it was 43 years ago, somebody out there is getting a little old, and I want to be able, even if they're willing to go on camera and we don't release the interview, I'm willing to sign whatever. If we don't release the interview until after they pass or what have you, or we just record it for historical purposes, I really want to talk to these people, because somebody knows something. And I am convinced that this took place. There's been too many people that have talked about it. There's been too many rumors of it. And is this the case in forest fires and everything else? Yeah, maybe, possibly. I haven't heard that, in other natural disasters, but I have heard it in regards to Mount St. Helens.
There's the Black Vault, right? John Greenwald.
Yes.
Okay. He has got, and I've talked to him about this specific document. There was a page in it's like the Ranger Handbook, right, about FBI DNA analysis that was done proving Bigfoot, right? And then the page is missing in the manual, in the field manual. Now, he's got the original, right? Can't FOIA this. It's like, no, it doesn't exist. What do you mean it doesn't exist? Here it is.
Yeah.
Right. What do you make of that, and why would the feds be so determined to keep this down, right? To keep Bigfoot paranormal, right? To keep that in the crypto side of zoology.
I think there's two different answers here. The conspiracy theory answer first is that I think they're keeping it quiet. This is let me backtrack that for a second. I think the bigger picture, actually, let's talk about the bigger picture first. I think the bigger picture of them keeping it quiet is because it could cause harm to some of the smaller towns, some of the recreational areas. And we talk about this in the movie. It could cause harm to some of these small areas that depend on recreationists, especially here in the state of Oregon, to utilize national forests, to utilize state parks, to utilize national parks, so on and so forth. I think a lot of people wouldn't feel great about wandering around a forest that there is no.
So you're saying tourism
Yeah.
would go down.
I think well, there's that, and there's like you said, opportunists and quote unquote treasure hunters who would go out there and try and bag the first Bigfoot and find fame and fortune, as the Neil Armstrong of Bigfoot bagging, or whatever you want to call it. I mean, there's all kinds of really wacky people, and so that's the first reason. The second reason I think they're keeping it quiet is the paranormal abilities. I think that, to answer your question directly, the government kind of let the cat out of the bag with that piece of, with that thing. And then with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers manual, the 1970s, it was describing different animals. And it was like, oh, the Bigfoot's one of the animals you might come across in the forest. And then a few people are like, whoa, you're admitting to Bigfoot being real. And they're kind of like, well, no, maybe that was a joke. Yeah, that was a joke. So that's a famous story. We have the headline in our film. It flashes by. I think that they did that thinking that, here we go. We got a hairy primate creature ape thing, wood ape wandering around the woods. And then I think at some point or another, somebody discovered that this thing is far more powerful than a monkey. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. The scenes with, excuse me, I had to use the cough button. With Kyle. Now, Kyle is a pseudonym. I'm assuming because his name is in quotes and it's just a first name, right?
Yes.
But he was a ranger, right? He was an Army Ranger.
He was he was in that unit. He was an intelligence analyst. And it took us about 4 months to get him to agree to come on to camera in that capacity.
And why? Okay. What does he say? What does he say?
Basically, he says that the U.S. government has a program of trained snipers to eliminate problem animals up and around national forest sites around Mount St. Helens, Mount Rainier. And if these Bigfoot get too comfortable with humans, then they are eliminated. That's basically what he's saying. And then the carcass is taken to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base.
He dropped that bomb, right?
Mm-hmm.
Wright-Patterson. And we all know, where Wright-Patterson is and what it's famous for. And to have somebody of Kyle, I'm just going to say Kyle because that's his name in the movie, for him to say it like this and so matter-of-factly, when you're in the Army, you've got a job. That's your job.
Yep.
And you go and you do your job. And in this case, it's to control the Bigfoot population.
Yep. And Jimmy, I have seen, these are things that we can't put in our film because we can't get permission because people don't want to get in trouble. I've seen FLIR footage of a helicopter tracking one. And I've also heard other reports of units in other parts of the country. I'm not even going to say where, but other parts in the country where they have done the exact same thing, that they've taken these specimens, if you will, out of the wild, these elite sniper units. And I used to be a DoD contractor. I did documentary work for the Department of Defense. I worked in the Pentagon for a while. This was a short time in the early 2000s. And, a lot of the things that these people are saying track with my knowledge. I was never in the military, but I learned enough from being around these folks to know that, a lot of the details there that you look for are pretty authentic, and the same is true with Kyle and what he had to say. I've never heard anybody else say that they were taking bodies to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. But the other interesting thing I'll say about Kyle is that he was chosen as a person to be able to have eyes on this and be part of this operation because he had a sighting at 13. We didn't have time to get into it in the documentary, but he was up in an area, I believe, called Indian Heaven, which you might be familiar with, near Mount Adams. And he was fishing. He was about 13 years old, and he heard a grunt, and he turned around, and there, again, was a mother Sasquatch showing her teeth and grunting at him, and he saw a juvenile one run away. And he felt a little bit of like a mind speak kind of a thing saying, "You are not wanted here. You need to leave. You need to leave now." And he says that it caused a lot of psychological damage to him through his 20s. But anyways, he ended up joining the Army. He was shot a couple of times in service. And that's about all I can say about him. But I believe what he has to say is real.
The telepathic side of this, I've done quite a few interviews with Bigfoot researchers about this, and the use of psychics and psychic mediums and people with psychic abilities to communicate and track with Bigfoot. And it's this part. Did they jumpstart us on evolution? Is where I'm going with this, right? We haven't developed the ability to just do this where we communicate that way. But it seems that Bigfoot has that ability. Is this the direction your research is headed?
Yeah. And you say that we don't have the ability, and I don't know about that. The jury's still kind of out because we have the ability to receive and send messages when they talk to us, and not everybody does. We've spoken to some people, and some people have given us different accounts. So like they'll see images in their head that are as clear as day, like you're dreaming, or even more vibrant than that, or they will actually hear a voice say things. So it's different depending on who you talk to.
Yeah, but that's coming at you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so Bigfoot has the ability, right, to right,
yeah,
to Wi-Fi in a signal.
Yeah,
we don't have the gift of the two-way communication.
No, not with other humans,
Right.
but people can talk to the Bigfoot and answer him back. So there's some chip, I don't know what you want to call it, processor in our brain that is capable of doing it, capable of sending and receiving. And again, just to go back to the science of all this, because all of this sounds so crazy and absurd, is that we are all, made of atoms. There's 92 atoms in the known universe. That's it. 92 atoms make up everything you see, touch, and feel, you eat, whatever. It's your wristwatch, it's your sandwich. You know what I mean? And so if you learn how to manipulate those atoms, those molecules, so on and so forth, you can do crazy things. I heard you and Dave talking about this last night, about this beam in Antarctica. This guy's talking about communication beam. There's just some really, really wild stuff, quantum entanglement and spooky action at a distance, and these theories that you get into in quantum physics that we're just starting to figure out. That I think that's how the teleportation works. That's how the mind speak works. That's how the cloaking works. Human beings only see 1% of the available light spectrum.
That's
which
it.
means we can't see 99% of what's happening around us.
That's it.
So there could be all kinds of invisible things living around us, ghosts and aliens and Bigfoot and who knows what else.
Do you remember the movie Fantastic Planet? Was that Fantastic Planet? Oh man, I'm probably getting anyway, where 1957, I think the film came out.
Oh, Forbidden Planet?
Yeah, Forbidden Planet.
Yeah,
Man,
yeah.
it's one of my favorite movies. I should be shot for messing that up.
I've never seen it.
Okay, well, but here's the thing. They the entity that they are fighting with was you know, they couldn't see it, but it was part of the reality that was there. But it's created by the mind.
Interesting.
Right? And it's in another dimension, right? And I have no issues with that.
No.
I mean, just a fraction of a number in one direction of or the other from what we can see, hear, touch, and feel, there could be a whole another version of us living.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's mainstream science right now.
It
Parallel
is.
universes, the multi-universes in every single movie that comes out. Every superhero movie now is multiverse. It's like they're trying to tell us something. You know what I mean?
Yes. The I wanted to kind of save the best for last and have you discuss some of your favorite cases that you not only put in the film, but you've done a lot of interviewing and researching out there with different people. So I wanted to get into that a little bit. But there's also a lot of Bigfoot researchers out there. Have you been following them, or are you just doing your own thing?
I'm kind of doing my own thing. We're kind of doing our own thing. I mean, there's a lot of quote unquote noise that's out there too, and we want to try and stay on a certain path. And it's easy, especially in any community. It doesn't matter whether it's Bigfoot, UFO, or bingo players. It doesn't matter. But there's politics in communities, and it's like we want to just try and keep our voices neutral as absolutely possible. And that's almost impossible to do, of course. But I try and read as much as I possibly can about what's happening and try and stay abreast about what's happening. But at the end of the day, like we want to feature real people, ordinary people having extraordinary experiences, and that's what we're going to continue to do.
So what about the crossover? I've done thousands of shows. Okay. I have. And you collect this information and you hear things and you put it in a box and you put it on the shelf. Later, somebody says something and I go, wait, whoa, right?
Yeah.
You start to see this, I'm sure, with Bigfoot experiences, these very consistent things from people that don't know each other.
Yeah.
What are some of those crossover points?
Oh my goodness. That's a tough question. I don't even know how to respond to that. Honestly, it's what's interesting to me, Jimmy, is I'm seeing the crossover points at the UFOs. Honestly, I keep hearing, and the orbs. We haven't even talked about the orbs yet. The orbs and the UFOs. I keep hearing that. Here's an interesting story for you. Quick, interesting story. So when we first started doing this documentary, this was during the pandemic. This project was born from the pandemic because we weren't bringing in any business like everybody else. And so Jill and I said to ourselves, the writer and producer, we said, well, what are we going to do now? Let's do the Bigfoot documentary. That's what we're going to do. So what a better way to avoid everything than to go out into the woods, right? So we thought, okay, we'll do a Bigfoot documentary and we should do that ghost documentary because we've had ghost experiences, and we should do that UFO documentary. And at about that same time, we read this book about the 39th parallel and about all the weird things that have happened on the 39th parallel. And it's written by Chuck. I can't remember Chuck's last. No, it's about the 10, Chuck. Yeah. But Yeah,
Great
Chuck
book.
Zukowski. Great book. It wasn't written by him. It was written by Ben. Anyways, read it. It's an awesome book.
I
So,
have it. He was on the show.
okay,
Was it Chuck Zukowski?
I think it's or Burkowski or something.
No,
Yeah,
it's Zukowski. Chuck
Zukowski. Amazing guy. So we read this book and we're like, oh yeah, that would be cool to actually to drive the 39th parallel, so on and so forth. So about this same time, there were reports coming out of Eastern Oregon of cattle mutilations. Lots of them. I mean, we're talking about like prized bulls, 10 head of cattle, I mean, the whole 9 yards. And so I was like, well, let's try and get a hold of these ranchers and see if they'll talk. So we got a hold of this guy out in this little tiny town called Brothers, which is in between Bend, Oregon and Burns, Oregon. It's like right in the middle. And it's literally, there's literally nothing there. There's not even really a store there. There's a store and restaurant that have shut down. And it's, it's literally like sagebrush and rocks and dust devils. And so we contacted him. He said he'd be willing to talk to us. And so this is concurrent with some of the Bigfoot filming that we're doing. So a few weeks prior to that, we were down just outside of Cottage Grove, Oregon, in the Owl Moon Lab, which is something we haven't even discussed yet. And we were doing some filming with co-producer Tobe Johnson and Daryl Adams. And so, long story short, we went out and we did this cattle mutilation piece, and we interviewed the rancher and stuff like that. And I thought to myself, I wonder if there's any correlation between what's happening at the Owl Moon Wilderness, which was a cornucopia of anything and everything you'd imagine, from UFOs, orbs, Bigfoot, gifting, weird voices, things that go bump in the dark, you name it. I was wondering if there's any correlation to this cattle mutilation in Cottage Grove. And so I went onto a map to see if I could find anything similar. And I literally drew a line from Cottage Grove right to the cattle mutilation site. Like, you could put a ruler on it. It was perfect. It was a perfect line. I'm going, what's happening on this line? What's going on here? You know what I mean? It was too much of a coincidence to ignore. Again, we didn't have enough time to put that in the film or into the next film, but I thought that was super, super interesting. So there's definitely crossover happening.
The you started to tell the story though on okay, so
yeah,
with who you were going out to meet.
Well, yeah, I'll tell that story real quick. So we go out and we interview this rancher, and we interview his ranch hand. Sorry. And we actually drove out to the site of where the bones still were of this cattle that had been mutilated. And it's 10 miles, literally 10 miles down this like insanely bumpy gravel road. And the ranchers like, and the ranch hand are like, yeah, Satan worshipers, come out here, precisely cut out the tongue and precisely cut out the udder. And the animals won't go near it, but we're pretty sure it was Satan worshipers. And we're like, okay, yeah, no, whatever. And the ranch hand's like sitting there going, when I found her, she was laying here and none of the cattle wanted anything to do with her. And there was no birds picking at her. And I thought that was weird. And I got down and I immediately like felt like I had to throw up. And then the next like 24 hours, 36 hours, I was like sick to my stomach with some weird virus, but it was Satan worshipers. And so finally, like, we're interviewing him and I go, you ever see weird lights in the sky? And he's like, actually, come to think of it, we do see some weird lights in the sky out here, but those might be military operations or whatever. And Jill and Mike, our cinematographer, and I were just looking at each other going, aliens, man. It's like the easiest explanation to precision. They're not Satan worshipers. They're not Satan worshipers. It's like, no Satan worshiper is going to have the means to drive down this road at night without headlights, to not be detected, to get a tongue and an udder and sexual organs,
off of a 2,000-pound beast.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, how are you putting this thing down to begin with? How do it's like, these people, and then we read a report, months later that somebody came out from Bend, some researcher or veterinarian who was like, it was birds. Literally, that was his explanation, is that birds did it. And it's just like, we got out of the car and we walked over to these bones that were sitting there. And you just knew, man, you just knew. You knew that something didn't feel right. Something was off. There was, and still, this was 5 months after the incident. There was nothing. Nothing would go near it. And the ranch head guy, he was like, I never saw a scavenger. We know it wasn't scavenged. The animal, it's like if the animals that are constantly looking for food aren't going to eat at this prime beef, if they're not going to eat it, then you know something's wrong with it, right?
Is what's your favorite story? I mean, I get that question a lot. Hey, Jimmy, your favorite interview. What is your favorite moment? And I'm able. There's always a couple of things that always stay on the front of my head.
Mm-hmm.
For you in making this doc, what are your favorite experiences from some of the interviews?
Oh my gosh. My favorite story I can't talk about yet. I'm gonna tell you that.
No.
They're all equal.
You want to know how good of a host I am? You're gonna tell that story. I guarantee.
If you're willing to have me come back, I'm gonna tell the story. But I want people to see the story first. It's coming out in the sequel.
What happened?
Well, two guys down in Southern Oregon saw something that, and these guys are as earnest and as honest and as genuine as Chad and Austin. They're like Chad and Austin 2.0. And they saw a Bigfoot do something that is entirely unimaginable and incomprehensible. And I think it's going to shock a lot of people when their story comes out. And that's all I'm going to say because it's an important part of the next film. But I'm happy to talk about any of the other stories in A Flash of Beauty, Bigfoot Revealed. No problem.
What was it legal? What they did?
Oh, 100%. They were just driving down the road at 10 o'clock on a sunny November morning. Yeah.
And yeah.
And that's that. Yeah. It's extraordinary. It's extraordinary. And the guy gave one, he said, I'm giving one interview and this is it. He's like, I didn't believe in any of this stuff, but what I saw that day, people need to know about. They need to understand that this is out there.
And there is an area where you're talking about where there are some pretty extraordinary claims coming out of that area when it comes to Bigfoot and spirituality and orbs and interplanetary and ET and communication and how they live. Why do you think it is that area? And is that what happened with these two?
Yeah. So this area, people will know, one of my favorite characters in A Flash of Beauty is Stan Avery. And, he's the guy that talks about the Bigfoot at the dump. And, this is happening in this same vicinity. This area is a hotbed of activity. And as the crow flies, you're about maybe 50 miles west of Grants Pass. You're maybe 75 miles northwest of Medford, Oregon. So it's all happening kind of in this area. Mm-hmm. I don't know what's going on down there, man, but there is something crazy going on. I mean, way crazier stuff. I talked to this guy the other day and he's like, oh, my neighbor came up to me. He lives way out in the country. He says, my neighbor came out to me and he says, my wife and kid watched a UFO hover over your house for 10 minutes, And he was like, oh, yeah, like, you mean like a little glowing light or something? He's like, no, this thing was huge. It was hovering over your house. People report black helicopters in the middle of the night out where they're not supposed to be. And the Bigfoot sightings are everywhere. There's a trail cam photo of a Bigfoot that's in our film that was taken in that same area.
Can we talk about that for a second? Okay, yeah. that was one of the jump frames for me, right? And when okay. Let's just stop right there. I can't believe I wanted to start the show off with that trail cam shot.
Okay.
No, I did, and here we are. We're at the end of the show, and I almost said that. I'm so glad that you brought this up. Okay, so you there's an overlay that's done.
Yes.
With the trail cam. Okay. to show. Well, I think what is it a deer?
It's a
like
deer,
baby
yeah.
deer.
Yeah, it's a deer. Mhm.
It's a deer. And then the other shot, which is Crazy Town. Where did you get it? What's the story behind this trail cam image?
Okay, so the individual whose trail cam it was did not want to go on camera. There's a lot of people out there that they want to just go back to their life. They don't want anything to do with the phenomenon. It's like, and we've had many people say, here, use it. I don't want to credit. I don't want anybody to know it's me. And these are not hoaxers. They have nothing to gain from this. These are not people that are looking to profit off of anything. This is that particular individual in this case. So the photo came to us through Stan Avery initially. And Stan Avery, the town plumber, and he's like, he knows everybody and everything, and everybody tells him their Bigfoot stories, tells him their Bigfoot stories. So, we got that photo from him, and I reached out to the guy, and he's like, yeah, here, here's a couple of photos, and I got a deer, and and I'm, the other thing too is I'm getting the original photos from these people. I'm not getting a copy. I'm like, don't email it to me. Send me the upload the original file, so on and so forth. I want the source. I want to be able to look at the metadata, and I want to make sure that it's not manipulated before I put it in the film. And that one struck me pretty significantly because you can see the hand is way longer than a human's hand. And that's the thing with the Bigfoot is their arms are way longer. Sometimes they go past their knees, and you can see that. You can see his fingers curling up in that shot. And then, of course, just so happened there was a deer there at some point. I think it was within a week or something.
Well, the grass and everything is in the same position, because when you do the crossfade, whatever that term is, and the dissolve. The dissolve. When you do that dissolve, it's like, what?
Yeah.
It is one of those moments, because and everybody listening to me right now and listening to Brett, if you go and watch the film just for that, because it is your brain needs to be on solid ground. And so when you do that dissolve, you realize that it's not trickery. It's not right. And because the first shot that you do is with Bigfoot, right? And you're looking at, well, it could be anything, kind of, right? Could be anything, right? Could be anything. And it's kind of walking, it's leaning forward, it's pretty husky, right? You can see the head, you can see, and then you do the dissolve to the deer, and you're like, oh crap, oh, and that was really well done, and the way that you presented that, Brett, it scared the crap out of me.
Yeah, what's so funny, Jimmy, is not a lot of people talk about that shot for some reason, and that's surprising to me. And so I'm glad you brought it up, because I think it's extraordinary. And I pixel peep this stuff, man. I really look at it. I don't want to just say, here's a photo, I'm going to throw it in. And that doesn't mean that there aren't hoaxes out there and people hoaxing, and these things happen and so on and so forth. I mean, that's just the world that we live in, especially with AI now. But, this photo was taken, I think, 5 or 6 years ago. It's
you really get
a real deal.
Yeah, the reason why that dissolve, thank you for giving me that word, by the way. The reason why that dissolve is so important is because you see the deer. We know how big a deer is. The deer is in nearly the exact same spot that is triggering the sensor on the trail cam, right? To snap an image, and you get everything in context, and you get the Bigfoot size, you get everything is there in that dissolve. I think that I am shocked that more people aren't talking to you about that, because I thought,
so am I.
I mean, I jumped out of my chair.
Yeah, it's remarkable. And, people say, well, it could be a hoax, could be a guy in a suit. Well, look, you got to look, again, it's like the Patterson-Gimlin film. You got to look at the logistics of things. It's like, how many people do you know that are 6'5", 6'6"? But tall people, unless they're on an NBA team, aren't really all that common. They just aren't. And then you've got to find a guy who's willing to put on the suit and run in front of the camera. There's work involved. You know what I mean? And these aren't people that want any attention. They want to just live their lives. They live out in the country. You know, they don't want to start something. They don't want an internet fad, whatever. He's like, I mean, the guy that gave me the photo, he's like, this is what it got. I don't know what it really is. I don't know if I even really believe in Bigfoot, but my camera captured this and I have no way of explaining this at all. And I said, will you talk about it on camera? No, don't need the publicity, you know. And he's a straight shooter. He's like, and I'm like,
man, that was a gift.
What can I do for you? Thank you. I appreciate it. Nothing.
Yeah, that was a gift. Now, I kind of want to talk about gifting for a second.
Mm-hmm.
And you brought up orbs earlier, and I kind of want to bring that. The only orb I've ever seen, like legit, Mount Adams, by the way.
Me too. Mount
Adams.
Mm-hmm.
Mount Adams. I still don't. Let's go there. This is what I saw. Okay. I didn't see a sphere. My orb was 2D, like a quarter.
Whoa.
Okay. It was flat. And so it comes out from behind. It's about a quarter mile away,
mm-hmm.
A few hundred yards at night. We're sky watching. I had maybe 75 friends with me. Fade to black event.
Sure.
Right.
Sure.
Okay. So anyway, we're sky watching. We got our night vision and it's 11 o'clock and, and I just kind of come down. It's dark. And I sit on this chair and I know that I've got like 100 people to my left, but I'm at the end. And, some Jimmy time. And I sit down in this chair in the dark and I just see this little gray thing come out behind these trees and then come down and then grow to like 50 feet.
Mm-hmm.
It's big, but it's 2D and it's gray. And I thought I had something in my eyes. I go just like this. I go, wow, that's kind of weird.
Yeah.
Oh, it's still there. And right as I'm thinking that, this lady who's standing behind me with her kids, right, she goes, is anybody looking at that gray orb out there in the field? I turn around. I'm going to say a bad word. You mean this shit is real, right? And I turn around and I'm looking again, and everybody is. You can hear the conversation in the dark going on. Mount Adams, and that's where I saw the Bigfoot prints. Like the next day.
It's a hotbed. It's a hotbed, man. So Jill and I were up there doing some filming, exploring, and she's like, "I'm watching this red orb move through these trees." And it's like, I'm always trying to debunk everything because that's what you have to do. You have to do that.
Yep.
And so I'm looking at it going, I don't know. That looks like maybe the top, like an airline, FAA light on top of a radio tower or something like that. And then it finally starts to move and I'm like, oh, damn. And so I run back to the car to get my camera and poof, it's gone. Just like that. And there's a lot of people that say that these things are tuned into us. They're reading our thoughts. They know our every move. We've interviewed people who have talked about orbs will be coming towards them. And as soon as that person thinks to themselves, I don't want you, I don't want to see you, that orb backs off and goes away.
The next day after I saw the orb, right, I was like, I'm going to debunk this.
Mm-hmm.
There's some trickery going on.
Yeah.
I jump on this motorcycle and I ride all the way out to the backside of that field. And I'm looking for an extension cord, right? Some kind of, I'm thinking, maybe there was a sheet of Mylar, and some kind of rear projection. Because it was what I saw, everybody saw it.
Yeah.
And once I got out to that side of the field and I realized that my depth perception was off, where I was thinking it was a wall of trees, right? And I get out there and I'm realizing they're spread way apart.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing out. And I'm just like, wait a minute here. There's nothing out. There's no way to do it. And I'm looking back at where I was sitting, and I'm on this motorcycle, and I get off of it and I'm kind of walking around and looking. And I was hoping, Brett, I swear on all that is holy, I wanted to find a cable.
Yeah.
I wanted to
Yeah.
see a little Honda generator sitting down in the ditch.
Yeah.
Right. I wanted to find and I didn't. And I got back on the motor. I'm like, oh crap. I saw my first orb. And
Yep.
my only orb. It was 2D.
That's weird, man. I've never heard of a 2D orb. Never. They're always 3D. There's this phenomenon called ball lightning that we think might be working in conjunction with orbs. They might be one and the same, that kind of a thing. But they're always spheres. They're always
I know.
No, they're not always spheres, but they're usually always spheres. Yeah.
Yeah. I totally get it. And the reason why I say it was 2D, it felt to me, this is my memory I'm playing off of. It was just so fantastical that it's kind of hard to comprehend. But when it came out from behind the tree, I kind of think it, a little bit of this action, and then came down. Yeah, there was something to it that it was definitely 2D. When you look at something and it's flat, there was nothing spherical to it at all, and it got really big. I know I sound nuts.
You don't actually, and you actually reminded me of a story that I'll tell real quick, kind of a UFO type story. And maybe there's a correlation here. I don't know. But so Jill and I were down at Phenomenon in 2020, I guess it was, maybe. I don't know. 2021. I can't keep my years straight. 2021. Phenomenon is down in Vernal, Utah, where Skinwalker Ranch is. Okay. So, which, you talk about everybody having a story, man. That whole valley, everybody's got a story. So we're out about 5 miles away from the Colorado border, near the small town of Dinosaur, which is Dinosaur National Monument. And this is about 4 hours before we interviewed Daryl Wilson, who's at the end of our film. And we're killing some time, and we love going down these old roads and just kind of exploring. So we go down this old dusty road where there's this kind of ATV area, campsite area, and it's picture perfect out. There's not a cloud in the sky, right? There's some thunderheads like way far north that you can see out there, but they're maybe 75, 100 miles away. And we park, we get out of the car. And I remember my friend, Chris, telling me this story about a guy that he knew that had been abducted as a Boy Scout. And the ET said, if you ever need us, just say, show yourselves, and we'll materialize, we'll unveil. All right. We'll take off the cloaking device. And I was like, I don't know why that entered my head, but it did. But again, middle of the afternoon, 75 degrees, perfect, a little bit of a breeze. And I say, I yell at the top of my lungs, show yourselves.
No, you didn't.
You did. Oh, yeah, I did.
All right.
I'm like, here I am. I'm in Utah. If there's ever a time and place to do it, it's right now. Of course, right. I should have done it at night. But so I say this, and then Jill's wandering amongst the trees and the cactuses and stuff like that. And I'm standing here, and I'm probably 300 yards away from our vehicle with the camera and drone and whatnot. I'm naked. I don't even have my phone with me. Right. And immediately within 30 seconds, no exaggeration, a cloud forms right over us. And the cloud is rectangular. And I'm like, Jill, are you watching this? Are you watching? It literally goes and forms. And she's like, yeah. So she takes out her phone and tries to get pictures of it. So we have some video of this. And maybe 15, 20 seconds later, I was like, do you see that? Do you see that? And out of the middle of this cloud is hold up your quarter there real quick. If you hold up your quarter and you flip it like that, that's exactly what was coming out of this cloud. It was, yes. And it was catching light. It looked like a hubcap. It was weird. It looked like a falling quarter, a hubcap or something like that, but it was spinning slow.
Like a pie plate or something.
Like a pie plate. Exactly. Yeah. And you could tell that it wasn't all that big, but it came right out of the cloud. And we're looking at these mountains, this mountain range that's probably, 2,500 to 3,000 feet. And I'm watching this thing just drop. And it lands on the top of the mountain. like behind a tree. So I'm a drone pilot. I run back as fast as I can and I grab my drone. I go, I'm going up there. I'm going to find out what the heck that thing was. So I flew at an altitude I wasn't supposed to. I'm just going to leave it at that.
Uh-huh.
There are laws.
Yes.
And I sped as fast as I could, beelined to that exact spot. It was ingrained in my head. I still see it to this day. I see the tree, I see the rocks, and I'm like, I'm going to go find out what the heck that was. And as I'm going there, I'm about halfway there. I'm about a mile away, which is quite a ways with a drone. I've got about 42 minutes on my battery, and my sensors are going wild in clear air. They're going, you're about to hit something. You're going to hit something. You need to turn around. So they've got these sensors on these drones that show that you're 5-6 feet away from slamming into a wall or a tree or a house or something like that. And they're going bonkers. And this was a brand new drone. And I'm like, I don't know what's going on, but I've never seen anything like this before. I know it's brand new, but the sensors are indicating that there's something that I'm about to collide with in clean open air. So I came back, landed the drone, and we still to this day have no explanation for that. But your story that reminded me of this long story of this thing that was like 2D,
Right.
that was like,
Oh yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. Wow. So when you hear Skinwalker Ranch, right?
Mhm.
And I love the new the new season.
Oh yeah.
It's breaking off right now. But the same complaints, up there, GPS going wacky, drones not behaving properly, helicopter, whatever.
Yeah.
There's something going on in that area. I can't quite put my finger on it, but I don't know if we're capable of understanding.
No, not yet. Not yet. We're learning a lot. And I think there are people out there that have a complete and total understanding of this stuff. Well, that's not entirely true. I mean, not anybody has a total understanding of everything, but far beyond what us normal people understand. Anybody that's got these retrieved, crashed UFOs,
That's next. That's next. When are you going to wrap up? Have you all the principal photography done for part 2?
Yeah. So part 2 is we're going to do a world premiere of the sequel at Phenomenon this year in Vernal, Utah, which is running from the 6th through the 9th of September. I'm not affiliated with them at all. I just want to advertise the fact that we're going to be screening the movie there.
Mm-hmm.
We actually have special guest appearances by Travis Taylor and Eric Bard, which was really cool to get them involved. Just small sequences. So we'll be doing that in September, and then the movie will be available in October. And then a special announcement tonight. I didn't even tell you this earlier, but we are gearing up to do the Voices in the Wilderness documentary about Ron Moorhead's experiences at the Sierra camp. So we're out there fundraising, putting the finances together to go out and take that book and do the documentary of it to tell Ron's story properly.
Bigfootdoc.com. Is that the easy way to do it?
That's it. Yep.
Okay.
That or Amazon, or, you can follow us on Facebook, and we read every message. We try and get back to people. We love hearing from folks.
Yeah, we've got that up in the chat now.
Mm-hmm. Cool.
Man, what a great. We left way too much on the table, so I just want to invite you back. Yeah. Let's do it as soon as we can, and then September is going to be up on us here pretty quick.
Yeah,
it's hard to believe. July's next.
I know.
July, August, September.
It's crazy.
So you're going to have it done and finished and wrapped and delivered in 2.5 months?
Yes. We've already done a preview screening of it, a work in progress screening up in Forks, Washington, Memorial Day weekend. It was about 95% finished. But I'm just putting final touches on it. And it's been a lot of work. But, man, I am very, very excited about this film. I think it's going to make some heads spin. I think it's the conversation, Jimmy, really needs to be about both UFOs and Bigfoot, and it's not. And the truth is people say that we may have intelligent life in the universe that might be our cousins. Well, guess what? We've got a brother and sister living in the woods.
Yeah,
And
we
they're out
certainly
there.
do. Let me
Yeah.
know if you need. I know somebody that does pretty good narration.
Yeah, I'll keep you in mind. For them, I'll keep them in mind.
Right. Thank you so much. And I look forward to our next conversation. And of course, part 2.
Yes, me too. Thank you so much, Jimmy. Really appreciate it.
Great show. Thank you so much, my brother.
All right. Take care, my friend.
Perfect night tonight. And now it is Bigfoot Doc, DOC, bigfootdoc.com. We've got it right up there in the chat, and of course it's over on the website and in our social media. Want to remind everybody what's going on tomorrow night. Mark O'Connell is with us, and we will be discussing the life and times of Dr. J. Allen Hynek. Mark O'Connell is a screenwriter too as well, and he's done a bunch of Star Trek episodes, and we'll be talking about some of that too as well, and those connections. All of that tomorrow night on Fade to Black. I want to thank Brett Eichenberger and everybody. Go and check out the movie. I was watching the comments, okay? I was watching everybody. Well, there'll be a test tomorrow. We'll see who is going to go and what. A Flash of Beauty. It's an amazing film. All right. Whew, man, what a great show tonight. And it's all very simple to say and do. Fade to Black is produced by Hilton J. Palm, Renee Newman, and Michelle Freed. Thank you to Dennis and Kevin. Webmaster is Drew the Geek. Music, Doug Aldrich. Intro, Spaceboy. SpaceboyMusic.com. Fade to Black is produced by KJCR for the Game Changer Network, and this broadcast is owned and copyrighted 2023 by Fade to Black and the Game Changer Network, Inc. It cannot be downloaded, copied, or used anywhere in the known universe without written permission from Fade to Black and the Game Changer Network. I'm yours, Jimmy Church, and until tomorrow night with Mark O'Connell, I want you to be safe. Go back, Lee Tappy.